The developer team that created Prince of Persia. Sorry, let me bring this up again. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. For some reason, I couldn't remember the name of the game for a second there. Um, their their team has been disbanded because the game did not sell well. Now, of course, this is not an unusual thing. In general, it happens a lot. Um, but apparent, and there's basically there's no sequel. This is a very highly rated game. I do want to note it was actually one of the best rated games this year, um, and it just it seems that this. Oh, actually, Ubisoft has responded. So Ubisoft has responded to the report, essentially confirming it to be true. In a statement to Eurogamer, the game's senior producer Abdulhal Elges said, "Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown is now at the end of its post-launch roadmap with 3 free content updates and 1 DLC that released in September. We are now focusing on making the game available to more players. It was recently launched on Steam and will be available on Mac by this winter. Most of the team members who worked on Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown have shifted to other projects that will benefit from their expertise. We know players have a love for this brand, and Ubisoft is excited to bring more Prince of Persia experiences in the future." So, before I get into my comments, I just want to note one last thing with this. One semi-comment, I guess you could call it. At least it looks like they weren't laid off; they were just transferred to different teams. Basically, the team is no longer active. There's not going to be a sequel, but the game isn't disappearing, and the people didn't lose their jobs. They just moved on to a different area. So, what are your thoughts?
So there's a lot. I think there are multiple reasons as to why this game failed. First one being which, I feel like they tried to remedy the situation, but too little, too late. They didn't launch it everywhere they could have from the get-go.
Yeah.
Like they mentioned that they only recently launched the game on Steam.
Mm-hmm.
Before, it was only on the Epic Game Store and most likely Uplay.
Yeah.
So if you're not selling to the majority of the PC audience, what do you think that's going to do to your sales? I mean, I think that's pretty obvious. It's play stupid games, win stupid prizes there. But also another thing I'm wondering also is, what was their expectation? What was their goal? Because I feel like with some games, or at least with some publishers, they have unrealistic goals.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we've seen this before where, especially I think it was, I can't remember what company we're talking about a few weeks ago or something like that, but essentially their goals were here, even if what they achieved was here and it was decent, it still wasn't enough for them. So that could be another reason, that could be another thing here. So, I mean, barring the PC sales, which I wouldn't be surprised if they were dreadful, say they sold adequately on console, but that probably wasn't enough for them. So they said, it's not worth putting more money into this, so we're just going to completely shut down this project and cancel all DLC. So that's another reason there. Of course, another reason why is people have wanted a Prince of Persia game for a long time. And it's been, before this game came out, the last game that we received was the pseudo reboot.
Yeah.
I think it was just called Prince of Persia 2013 or something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that. So it's been over a decade. So I think some people definitely were not happy with the fact that it's the first Prince of Persia game in a long time, and you're not playing as the prince. So, playing as someone completely different definitely would rub people the wrong way. I would think. So that could be another reason there. With a similar haircut to Miles. But yeah, so I think just a combination of things. I think mainly the fact that you didn't sell the game on Steam, and you only sold it recently. And I mean, granted, I don't know how many people actually play on Mac, but you're only releasing it also on Mac way later. So you cut out a huge potential of sales there by only having it exclusive to the Epic Games Store and Uplay. So I hope that was worth it, guys. The fact also that maybe your expectations were too high. You wanted to say maybe sell, I mean, I don't think we have any sales numbers, but say they wanted to sell 6-7 million copies and they sold only 2 million. Like, hey, 2 million is a pretty good number, but it's probably not good enough for you. So that's probably another reason why you're disappointed. And then also, like I said, you're having someone who isn't the prince, and that, you know, makes people disappointed and might not be interested. So yeah, I mean, at least the people weren't laid off, so you know they still have employment. But I feel like this could have been better. Now, granted, I don't think this will have an impact for the Prince of Persia Sands of Time remake. I think that's still something that's handled by a separate studio, so that should still be coming. Although, I also hope that this wouldn't necessarily impact the investor's view or the CEO's view of like, hey, should we continue working on this project? Because don't forget, they also postponed the game or delayed the game because they were transferring development over from, I think from a team in India to the team back in Montreal. So, you know, hopefully them canceling this doesn't make them think, is it worth, you know, continuing working on Prince of Persia if people aren't interested in it? When, you know, I would say people are interested in it, but I mean, also another thing is the fact that sure Prince of Persia started out as a 2D game, but I think that another possible thing that could also impact the situation is the fact that maybe with the exception of the ports for, or I guess I wouldn't say a port, but because it's not the same thing, but the Game Boy Advance versions of Prince of Persia, there hasn't been a 2D title in ages. It's like a lot of people, if they hear Prince of Persia, they think 3D adventure platformer game. They don't think 2.5D was this Metroidvania. Yeah, so they don't think of that. So that could be another reason as to why, because people said, oh yeah, I want to play as, you know, the prince. I want to be in a nice 3D adventure. You know, I want to go back in time with my dagger and stuff. They're like, they probably don't know about the original Prince of Persia games where, you know, it was just 2D platforming. So this could be another reason as to why things, I mean, I'm not saying that them trying to do a Metroidvania wasn't a good thing. I mean, if, you know, having a little bit of variety isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I think the market just wasn't ready for that, especially considering the fact that some people might also be tired of having a lot of Metroidvanias since we've got tons of them, but granted, we've got tons of other. I can definitely agree with that sentiment there. But the unenlightened masses, they don't share our sentiment.
That's right.
But yeah, I think that's just another strike against this game.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I pretty much agree with what you said. One thing that I will say, I don't think that there are as many people who have memories of this. Well, I should say there's a lot more people who never played the old games than there are people who have. I mean, yes, of course, people are, I mean, you know, my age, you know, down to your age, and I mean, you'll probably have the occasional, you know, younger millennial, or not millennial, like Gen Z or whatever, you know, who's played some of the old Prince of Persia games, but, you know, like the original Sands of Time and its sequels were like early 2000s. And then there was that reboot, which I think was like 2008, if I remember correctly, is what it really was. Which, I mean, like, the only one I even played at all was Sands of Time, and I didn't get super far into it. I got stuck on some fight partway into it. That was one of the first GOG games I bought, actually. And that was like 2010, I believe I bought that. but like it's a series I always wanted to get into, and it's just because I got stuck on Sands of Time that I never went any further. But like this game, I think it has a few problems, a few things going against it. One, the Prince of Persia brand is, apart from people who actually were around when the other games came out, anybody who's like Gen Z and everything, for the most part, they won't have any idea what Prince of Persia is because they're so far removed from it. There's probably a bunch of them who were born after the game came out. And, I mean, after probably even some of them who were born after the reboot came out. I mean, yes, those kids would be on the younger side, but even then, they'd be in their teens, which is crazy to think about. But yeah, so it has that going against it. Then, of course, like you said, being 2D instead of 3D, that certainly is a mark against it, or 2.5D instead of 3D, because in general, people are more interested in the 3D games than they are in the 2D games, and I definitely understand that. Sometimes I'm more interested in 3D games than 2D games, but then it's also just the fact that, I should say, there are some people who are not interested in Metroidvanias. And I personally, of course, I love Metroidvanias, and I don't care if they're 2D or 3D, I love them all because, I should say, I love both types of games. That doesn't necessarily mean I love every single one, because some of them suck. But, I very much want to play this game. From the first time I saw it, I was like, this game looks fantastic. I'm super interested in it. And the only reason I haven't gotten it was partially because, one, it came at a bad time, early this year. But then, two, because of the fact that I was just waiting for a good sale. And I was looking at prices now for the physical version. And right now, Walmart has it for $20 for Switch. So I may end up pulling the trigger pretty soon on that, just because, it's like, I think the normal price was $40 or $50. So it's a good enough discount to where I think it could be worthwhile. Plus, of course, it's hard to tell whether this is a game that's actually going to have copies in a while or if they're just going to disappear. And so I'm just like, should I get it sooner or should I wait? And of course, I need to find out, what performance is like on Switch, but I also just want a physical version. So there's all that. But yeah, I personally, knowing that these people didn't actually get fired and they just got transferred to other studios, that makes me feel better about this whole situation, because everything I've heard about this game is that it is amazing, that it is one of the best Metroidvanias people have played. And that says a lot, how much people love this game. Like, Tales of Kenzero Zao, on the flip side, that was one I enjoyed and I supported because of what the creator, the reason he created the game, and just how much it hit close to home with losing my dad. But it bombed. It bombed horribly, and unfortunately, it's gotten to the point where, it seems like it was largely a Sweet Baby issue, or, I should say, I think it's half a Sweet Baby issue, and the other half is the problem with all the people bringing up that Sweet Baby had involvement and turning people away because of that. People deciding they don't want to play it because they assume that it's this horrible woke garbage, when in reality, while there was some woke garbage in there, it was very little in the grand scheme of things. And I think people had reasonable complaints about the game, and that it wasn't the best Metroidvania I've ever played, but it was still a pretty good game, and I liked it overall. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is that you have two different Metroidvania games that are similar-ish in, like, how they look, but one does really well, or actually neither one of them did well, but one of them completely bombed, and then The Lost Crown Doesn't seem like it bombed, but it didn't do well enough for them to want to make a sequel and to keep the studio going for a sequel. So, anyway, I kind of rambled there, as per usual. All right, you got any other thoughts on this?
No, sir.